Ladies and gentlemen, certainly, here's an introduction for your motivational speech in the style of Shi Heng Yi, with a calm, profound, and reflective tone that combines mysticism, inner strength, and disciplined clarity. There are moments in life when the world grows too loud. The noise of ambition, desire, distraction. It becomes a storm, and in the midst of that storm, a quiet voice speaks. A voice not born from fear, but from foresight. A voice that says, "Don't step outside tomorrow." This is not a threat. It is a reminder. There are days when silence is protection, stillness is power, and withdrawal is not weakness. It is wisdom. When the divine speaks, it doesn't shout, it doesn't plead. It simply says, and those with eyes to see and ears to hear, they understand. The ones who act without reflection suffer the fate of the blind, but those who pause, who listen deeply, live by a different rhythm. A rhythm not of this world. This message is not about hiding, it is about aligning. When the time is not right to move forward, stepping back is not hesitation. It is harmony with the greater order. Today, we step into understanding. We explore what it means when God says, "Do not step outside tomorrow." What is being protected? What is being taught? And what awakening lies within this divine instruction? Divine warnings are not random. They are aligned with universal shifts. In the realm of spiritual understanding, there exists a delicate balance between chaos and order, between movement and stillness, between acting and observing. When a divine message comes forward with precision, it is never to be taken lightly or dismissed as coincidence. Every message from the divine originates from a higher awareness of what is unfolding, both in the visible and invisible realms. The spiritual realm is not bound by time as we understand it. It sees the ripple before the stone even hits the surface. When a warning like "Don't step outside tomorrow" is spoken, it is not born out of fear. It is an alignment with something that is shifting in the fabric of reality, something beyond human perception, yet deeply connected to human destiny. In every era, those who were attuned to the frequency of divine instruction were the ones who survived storms that others didn't see coming. It is not because they were better. It is because they were listening. They understood that divine timing does not obey our schedules. They understood that spiritual intelligence flows from a higher plane, and sometimes the command is not to act, but to pause. That pause is not random. It is coordinated with unseen energy, energies that may be dangerous, destabilizing, or purifying. A universal shift can come in many forms: emotional turbulence, global unrest, spiritual warfare, or the unraveling of old systems. Whatever the form may be, the divine always knows, long before it manifests. There is an ancient wisdom in recognizing the signs before they become consequences. When the Creator speaks through subtle impressions, dreams, sacred texts, or a still small voice, those who are spiritually awake will recognize the significance. They won't ask, "Why not tomorrow?" They will ask, "What is being aligned?" Because in that moment, it is not about convenience or logic. It is about synchronization. A divine instruction is always synchronized with a higher movement, and to follow that instruction is to step into alignment with a rhythm greater than your own. The physical world moves by the ticking of clocks, but the spiritual world moves through waves, waves of consciousness, waves of intention, waves of destiny. When a wave is coming, and the divine says "Do not move," it is because standing still is the only way to stay above it. If you try to move against the wave, you will be pulled into chaos. But if you listen, if you stay rooted, then what was meant to overtake others will pass over you. This is not superstition. This is spiritual strategy. And spiritual strategy begins with obedience to the divine whisper. The instruction not to step outside is not only about geography. It is about consciousness. Sometimes outside means stepping outside of trust, outside of discipline, outside of divine timing. When we move without clarity, we expose ourselves. When we wait with awareness, we shield ourselves. God never wastes words. And when a message is given, especially one wrapped in urgency and silence, it is a sign that something has already been set in motion behind the veil. Spiritual maturity means understanding that you do not need all the answers before taking action, or in this case, before choosing stillness. If the divine says wait, then it is because movement would misalign you from the protection that is being offered. We must learn to move not with pressure, but with presence. We must learn to be sensitive to timing, not just opportunity. Divine warnings are aligned with what the heavens already see, and what we cannot yet see is often what matters most. The message not to step outside is an invitation to trust a timeline higher than your own. Stillness is a command when the unseen becomes active. In the material world, we are taught that progress is synonymous with motion, that forward movement is always the right direction, and that stillness often means stagnation. But in the spiritual realm, stillness is a form of deep alignment. It is not a passive waiting, but an active obedience. When the divine instructs stillness, it is because something in the unseen world has begun to stir, something that requires sensitivity, caution, and inner clarity rather than external action. The unseen is where causes are formed before effects are visible, and when that realm becomes active, it signals a shift in energy, a shift in spiritual dynamics that will soon cascade into the physical. When the unseen becomes active, human logic falls short. Our eyes cannot perceive the disturbance in the spiritual field. Our minds cannot measure the weight of invisible forces, but the soul feels it. The spirit recognizes the tremble in the unseen, and those who are spiritually awake sense the change before it arrives. They may not know what it is, but they feel its approach. This is why stillness becomes necessary. Because in times of spiritual activity, motion can be dangerous. Movement can lead you out of the divine perimeter, away from the zone of protection. The command to remain still is not a punishment, it is a preservation strategy. Stillness gives space for discernment. It allows the soul to anchor while the world begins to shift. When you are still, you are able to perceive whispers that would be drowned in the noise of busyness. Stillness is a posture of listening. It tells the divine, I am aware that something is shifting. I choose not to react out of habit. I choose to wait for clarity. This spiritual discipline is one of the most powerful forms of obedience, because it goes against the ego's desire to control, to act, to fix. It humbles the self and surrenders the will to a higher rhythm. The power of stillness is that it aligns you with the unseen protection you do not even realize you need. When God says, don't step outside, it is because what is happening cannot yet be explained. It is unfolding in layers behind the curtain of the visible world. It may be a spiritual battle, an atmospheric disturbance, a divine test, or the cleansing of an energy field. But whatever it is, stillness keeps you from walking into territory that was not meant for your feet. It shields you from storms that have not yet reached your consciousness. To obey stillness is to declare, I do not need to see to trust. I do not need to understand to submit. That is spiritual maturity, that is warrior discipline. The unseen is not just mystical, it is foundational. Everything that manifests in the material world is first born in the spiritual. So when the divine becomes silent or commands you to pause, it is a sign that something sacred is moving. Something invisible is taking shape. And when that happens, your job is not to run into the unknown, but to anchor yourself in the known presence of the divine. In stillness, you allow the energy to settle. You give space for divine alignment to occur without interference. You remove yourself from paths that are no longer safe, no longer aligned, no longer fruitful. To stand still while others run is a mark of inner strength. To be calm when others are frantic is a sign of deep grounding. To hold your position when the unseen is active is to trust the divine navigator over your limited map. The command of stillness is not a denial of progress. It is a deeper progress into trust, alignment, and unseen protection. External silence invites internal clarity. In a world dominated by endless noise, notifications, and stimulation, silence has become a rare experience. Yet silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of space. A space where thoughts settle, emotions rise to the surface, and the voice of the inner self begins to speak. External silence is a doorway into internal awareness. It strips away distractions, exposes hidden beliefs, and reveals the state of the soul. When the divine commands silence, it is because clarity cannot be found in chaos. The voice of clarity is always soft, subtle, and easily drowned by the noise of external life. When we are constantly moving, constantly consuming, constantly reacting, the mind becomes foggy. Confusion is not born out of lack of information. It is born out of overload. Too many voices, too many opinions, too many directions. Clarity, on the other hand, is found in reduction. It is born in simplicity. It emerges when everything unnecessary is removed. External silence forces the senses to withdraw from the outside world and return inward. It pulls attention away from the surface and into depth. This process is not always comfortable. In the beginning, silence feels empty, even frightening, because it confronts the individual with themselves. Most people avoid silence because they are afraid of what they will hear in it. They fear the pain, the truth, the doubts, the unresolved questions that begin to rise when the noise stops. But it is in that very space that true clarity begins, because what is not faced cannot be healed, and what is not revealed cannot be aligned. In external silence, distractions are removed, and the soul is left with only what is real. This is where divine alignment begins, not in performing or pretending, but in being honest with oneself. When the divine says, "Do not step outside," it is also an invitation to step inward. It is not just a command for physical stillness, but for inner reflection. The silence outside is a mirror of what is needed inside. It is a sacred pause that invites awareness. When the world grows silent, it is not empty, it is full of potential. It becomes a canvas for revelation, a sanctuary for divine whispers, a space where clarity is not forced but allowed to arise naturally. Internal clarity does not come from forcing answers. It comes from sitting with questions until they dissolve. It comes from allowing emotions to surface without judgment, from observing thoughts without attachment, and from witnessing the self without filters. Silence offers the space for this witnessing. It becomes the soil in which insight grows. The insights that emerge from such clarity are not just intellectual. They are spiritual. They bring direction, peace, and alignment with one's higher path. The process of internal clarity also reveals what no longer belongs. In silence, one becomes aware of false priorities, unhealthy patterns, misaligned goals. It becomes easier to discern what is authentic and what is adopted. The noise of the world often pushes people to live lives that are not their own. But in silence, the truth begins to speak, and the soul starts to remember. The external silence creates a womb for this rebirth, a space where old layers fall away and the inner compass is recalibrated. Clarity is power, but it is not loud. It is soft, sure, and often wordless. It is the knowing that arises when the mind stops grasping. It is the guidance that emerges when the heart is finally still enough to listen. The divine uses silence not as a punishment, but as a portal, a passageway into deeper understanding, deeper truth, and deeper connection. Those who can embrace the discomfort of silence will eventually find themselves surrounded by the clarity they were searching for all along. Protection comes through obedience, not explanation. In the realm of spiritual understanding, human beings are often conditioned to seek explanations for every instruction, to understand before they act, to analyze before they submit. But the spiritual path does not function according to the logic of the intellect. It moves in rhythm with divine wisdom, which often transcends human understanding. When a divine instruction is given, its power lies not in our comprehension of it, but in our response to it. Obedience is the bridge between divine wisdom and divine protection. It is the act of trusting a higher intelligence even when the mind cannot yet grasp the reason. Throughout history, moments of divine intervention came wrapped not in lengthy explanations, but in simple instructions. Build an ark, leave your homeland, do not look back, stay inside. These were not commands designed to be debated. They were invitations to align. Protection was not promised to those who understood, but to those who obeyed. Because the divine sees beyond the veil. It sees consequences before causes manifest, storms before clouds form, danger before footsteps even begin. And when it speaks, it is not reacting. It is already responding to what is coming. That is why obedience is the response of the wise. Obedience is not passive. It requires courage. It requires humility. It demands the surrender of the ego that wants control. The ego says, I will act when I understand, but the soul says, I will act because I trust. This is the essence of spiritual protection. It is not found in arguing with the divine, but in moving, or pausing, according to its instruction. When the command is given not to step outside, that instruction carries a layer of protection that no physical shield could offer. It positions you out of harm's way, not because you saw the danger, but because you honored the voice that did. This kind of obedience can only be cultivated through relationship. You obey whom you trust. And you trust when there is consistency, when there is intimacy, when there is evidence of past faithfulness. When the divine says stay, and you have learned from past moments where obedience led to preservation, your soul does not hesitate. It moves in faith. Faith is not blind. It is deeply rooted in memory, in spiritual experience, in the inner knowing that the one who speaks to you is not leading you astray. Many fall into the trap of demanding signs before they act, clarity before they trust. But often, by the time the sign becomes visible, the moment for protection has passed. Obedience allows you to move ahead of the visible. It places you in alignment with the unseen preparation that the divine has already set in motion. It is like stepping under a covering just before the rain begins. The one who hesitates may still get wet, but the one who obeys moves in harmony with the unseen forecast. Protection through obedience is also a test. It tests the posture of your heart. Are you only willing to trust when it feels safe, or are you willing to trust when nothing makes sense? Are you only obedient when it fits your plan, or are you willing to pause your plan in order to honor a higher one? These moments reveal your alignment. They expose whether you are walking by faith or walking by preference. In divine matters, preference can be dangerous. It can lead you into exposure when you were meant to be hidden. It can take you outside when the command was to remain covered. There is wisdom in restraint. There is security in surrender. And there is great power in obedience. The instruction not to step outside is not about confinement. It is about care. The divine is not limiting your freedom. It is securing your future. You may not see the danger outside, but the divine does, and it speaks not to control, but to shield. When obedience becomes your natural response, protection becomes your constant companion. Spiritual sensitivity requires listening beyond logic. In the pursuit of understanding, many rely solely on what the mind can grasp, what the senses can perceive, and what the intellect can reason. But there are dimensions of life where logic cannot reach. The divine speaks in ways that are often beyond words, through impressions, shifts in energy, moments of silence, and the still whispers of intuition. To be spiritually sensitive is to be tuned into those frequencies that cannot be heard with the ears, or explained with formulas. It is a listening that emerges not from the head, but from the heart and the spirit. There is a deeper listening that only develops through stillness, surrender, and inner refinement. It does not demand answers. It does not argue with the invisible. It simply becomes quiet enough to perceive. This kind of listening is not taught in schools or developed through information. It is cultivated through presence, through attentiveness to the subtle. When God says, "Do not step outside tomorrow," that message is not delivered through loud declarations or flashing signs. It may come in a dream, a sudden unease, a sacred scripture, or a moment of deep clarity. It requires the inner ear to hear what the outer ear cannot detect. In a world obsessed with logic, many miss divine instruction because it does not follow expected patterns. Logic asks for reasons. It wants everything to add up. But faith listens anyway. Spiritual sensitivity means being willing to pause when others rush forward. It means paying attention to the feeling beneath the surface, to the pull of energy in a space, to the invisible shift that precedes visible change. It is knowing that something is happening, even if it cannot yet be seen. It is not irrationality. It is a higher form of awareness that transcends intellectual boundaries. Those who develop spiritual sensitivity often live with a different rhythm. They respond not to noise, but to presence. They are not moved by pressure, but by alignment. They wait when others act and act when others hesitate. Their lives are guided not just by reason, but by revelation. And revelation comes through listening beyond logic. When a divine instruction is given, the spiritually sensitive recognize its weight immediately. They do not need to debate or delay. They know, and that knowing becomes their compass. This sensitivity also protects. It becomes a shield against deception, manipulation, and distraction. When the soul is trained to listen deeply, it can sense danger before it arrives. It can discern truth even when it is whispered in a storm of lies. It can detect peace in the midst of chaos and follow that peace into safety. Listening beyond logic allows the spirit to rise above fear, to see with clarity in times of confusion, and to walk in obedience without needing all the answers. It becomes a path of strength, not weakness, because it is rooted in trust, not guesswork. Developing spiritual sensitivity requires intention. It is the fruit of time spent in solitude, in prayer, in observation. It is birthed through discipline, through saying no to the noise of the world in order to say yes to the silence where the divine speaks. It is found in moments when you sit with discomfort long enough to hear what it is trying to teach. It grows when you choose presence over performance, awareness over assumption, alignment over ambition. Spiritual sensitivity does not scream, it listens. It leans in. It waits for the deeper signal. When God gives a warning, it is not always wrapped in logic. It is wrapped in timing, in presence, in a vibration that only the sensitive will detect. And those who have trained their spirits to hear beyond what is spoken will move accordingly. They will stay inside not out of fear, but out of faith. They will pause not because they understand, but because they trust the one who sees what they cannot. Listening beyond logic becomes the gateway to divine safety, to supernatural clarity, and to alignment with the unseen flow of grace. Some battles are avoided, not fought, through divine restraint. In the spiritual journey, there is a deep misunderstanding that strength is always proven in confrontation, that to overcome a challenge, one must always engage with it directly. But divine wisdom often leads in the opposite direction. There are moments when the greatest victory lies not in engagement, but in withdrawal. Not every storm is meant to be walked into. Not every enemy is meant to be faced. Some battles are sent to test your discernment, not your aggression, and divine restraint is the invisible armor that keeps you from fighting wars that were never yours to begin with. There are times when silence is not weakness, but a strategy, when staying hidden is not fear, but protection. and when stillness in the face of provocation is not avoidance, but wisdom. Spiritual maturity recognizes that reacting to every threat is not a sign of strength, but a symptom of spiritual immaturity. The divine does not call you to fight every noise, every insult, every disturbance. Sometimes it calls you to be still so that what was sent to harm you passes without ever touching you. This is divine restraint, a higher path that avoids unnecessary battles because it sees what the human eye cannot. Divine restraint is deeply tied to timing. A battle that is meant to be fought today may become irrelevant tomorrow. What seems urgent in the moment may be completely unnecessary if you simply wait. The enemy that looks threatening now may destroy itself without you lifting a finger. That is why God says, do not step outside. Because the act of stepping out might pull you into warfare you were never meant to engage in. Restraint is not only about self-control, it is about spiritual positioning. Staying where you are told to stay may seem passive, but in truth, it is the action that activates divine defense. When the Creator holds you back, it is not rejection, it is redirection. It is not delay, it is design. Many losses come from stepping into battles prematurely or entering fights that were orchestrated by ego rather than spirit. Divine restraint allows you to bypass traps that were dressed as opportunities. It gives you the wisdom to recognize that just because you can fight doesn't mean you should. Just because a door is open doesn't mean it's yours to walk through. Just because someone calls you out doesn't mean you are required to answer. The power of restraint lies in the strength to say no when your pride wants to say yes. It lies in the clarity to recognize the cost of unnecessary engagement. Not every disruption deserves your attention. Not every challenge is worthy of your energy. Some things are sent simply to lure you away from your path, to provoke you into leaving the protection of divine instruction. And once you've stepped outside, you've stepped away from the covering. That is why the instruction matters more than the appearance of the situation. There is a deeper strength in walking away than in standing to fight something meaningless. Restraint does not mean cowardice. It means you are aligned with a higher order. It means your vision is not limited to the moment, but anchored in eternity. The divine understands that sometimes what you walk away from saves your destiny more than what you conquer. To obey the call to be still, to stay, to not engage is to trust that there is a greater battle strategy already in motion, one that does not depend on your performance but on your positioning. Restraint is a spiritual weapon. It diffuses attacks before they start. It shields your energy from being drained by distractions. It preserves your peace by refusing to give access to chaos. It guards your destiny by keeping you away from places that look tempting but are filled with hidden snares. Some battles you are called to face, but others you are called to avoid, not out of fear, but out of faith in a wisdom greater than your own. A closed door is sometimes the greatest gift of guidance. In life, we are conditioned to see opportunity as movement, as access, as open paths that welcome us forward. When something is closed, denied, or blocked, the natural response is to feel rejected, frustrated, or confused. Yet in the realm of divine wisdom, a closed door is never a punishment. It is a form of protection, a redirection, a signal that the timing, the environment, or the destination is not aligned with your highest path. When God closes a door, it is not the end of something valuable. It is often the beginning of something unseen, something better prepared, something hidden from immediate view. The closed door may appear as disappointment on the surface, but beneath it lies a layer of mercy that only hindsight can fully reveal. What you may have stepped into with excitement might have consumed your peace, compromised your purpose, or exposed you to harm. The divine sees the full picture while you see only the moment. And that is why trust is essential. A closed door tests your ability to surrender to a will greater than your own. It asks whether you are walking by sight or by spirit, whether you are led by outcomes or by obedience when God says, "Do not step outside tomorrow." That instruction may feel limiting at first. It may appear like the shutting of an opportunity, the pause of progress, the delay of a breakthrough. But in truth, it is the deliberate sealing of a door not meant to be opened in that moment. It is the divine saying, "What you seek is not in that direction." The closed door then becomes not just an obstacle, it becomes a compass. It points you away from misalignment, from danger, from wasted effort. It teaches you to pay attention not only to what opens, but also to what remains firmly shut. There is a sacred wisdom in recognizing when a door is closed by divine design. It means you no longer need to force it open, no longer need to manipulate circumstances or question your worth because of the delay. The closed door is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is an act of divine discernment on your behalf. Sometimes you are not ready. Sometimes the space is not ready for you. Sometimes the people, the timing, the energy is not aligned to support what you carry. And so the door closes not out of rejection, but to protect the seed of destiny within you from being placed in infertile ground. The guidance that comes through closed doors often carries more clarity than the ones that open. Because an open door can be permissive, but a closed one is definitive, it eliminates distraction, removes guesswork, sharpens focus. It tells you where not to go, and in doing so, begins to refine the direction of your steps. Divine guidance is often more visible in restriction than in release. The restraint reveals the path, not because it explains it, but because it clears away what doesn't belong. Learning to honor closed doors is part of spiritual maturity. It means you trust the process even when it slows. You trust the voice even when it quiets. You trust the path even when it curves. The greatest breakthroughs are sometimes hidden behind seasons of silence and redirection. The doorway that felt like loss may, in time, prove to be your greatest protection. And what was withheld was not because you were unworthy, but because your destiny required a different route. A closed door is not just about the moment. It is about the long-term alignment of your purpose with the divine timeline. When you walk with awareness, even a shut gate becomes sacred. You begin to see not just what is happening, but why it may be necessary. The soul learns to breathe in that pause. The spirit learns to grow in that silence. The heart learns to find gratitude not only for the yes, but also for the no.